Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Paz. With me today, very special guest. We know him as the voice of OVW, the Wizard of Oz, the voice of Louisville Wrestling. He is an announcer, a commentator. He's done it all, Mr. Dean Hill. Dean, welcome to the two-man power trip. How you doing?
Thank you for deeming me worthy of this.
This is great to have you on. I mean, obviously, OVW's kind of been in the news big time lately, and you're kind of the OG, really, of OVW.
Oddly enough, when I found out that they were going to, I think it's Netflix wrestlers, I was so thrilled for all the guys that have been there for years and years. Um, Many years ago, I don't remember the exact year, but when Danny Davis still owned his dream, which was Ohio Valley Wrestling, he had reached out to, or they had reached out to Danny, and I'm talking about Country Music Television, CMT, and they were wanting to do a reality TV show about OVW, and they're going to have Gilbert Coursey, who is a Fox TV anchor here in Louisville, Kentucky, and myself do all of the play-by-play and the voiceover work, and kind of like Waylon Jennings on the Dukes of Hazzard, that kind of stuff. And we were so excited. We even met and did some demos for them. And oddly enough, at that time, there was some kind of a thing going on in the hierarchy of CMT, and some of the top people left, and they plugged some other people in, and the reality OVW TV show got put on the back burner, and we never heard from them again. So we were very excited that they've doing this now, because a lot of guys have been there as long as I was, and I did the first 1,100 TV shows. So I'm so thrilled for these guys. As a matter of fact, I had one of them reach out to me on Facebook page and said, "Hey, Dean, you're on Netflix." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Yeah, they started this thing from the beginning, and your voice. I don't know if my face was on it. Doesn't matter to me. Just honored to play a small part of it."
Did you actually see the documentary? Like, what did you kind of think of it?
I don't get Netflix.
Oh, okay. It was good. It was very good. I mean, they do obviously show some old stuff, but it's basically Al Snow and what he's doing with OVW today, and the life and times of a wrestler. Which I don't know how much has changed over the years, but I'm sure it's changed just a little bit.
Well, I'm sure it's changed just because of the new age generation, but the concept is going to be the same for life.
How did you get into OVW originally? Like, was that something you wanted to be a part of?
A total fluke. Um, I was a Louisville City police officer for 25 years, and my first wife and I decided to get divorced, and we basically split everything right down the middle. She took the house, I took the payments. She took the car, I took the payments. She took the furniture, I took the payments. So I needed a part-time job to make ends meet. So I went down. I started working for a security company called Andy Frayne. They hired off-duty police officers for the rock concerts and the country shows, and skates on ice and Sesame Street. And they also had to have an officer in case anybody needed to get arrested, went out, off the deep end or whatever. Every Tuesday night, myself in jeans and a shirt that said Andy Frayne on it, would, along with a couple of uniformed guards, would walk the bad guys to the wrestling ring, and they all kind of got to know me there. Miss Christine, which is Teeny Jarrett, Jerry Jarrett's mom, Jeff Jarrett's grandmother, she ran what was, I think it was CWA, that later became USWA.
Yep.
It was the Memphis, Nashville, Louisville, Evansville, Jonesboro, Arkansas loop. And they did a show there one time where Jerry the King Lawler and Superstar Bill Dundee were in a fight, and Louisville Gardens was at that time kind of roped off, for lack of a better term, in a horseshoe shape around the wrestling ring. And Lawler and Dundee had started wrestling up into the bleachers, off the floor and up into the rafters, so to speak. Well, a bunch of the diehard fans, we'll call them, started running around the upper bleachers. They were going to get over as close to it as possible. And I realized that I needed to cut them off. Well, back then I was young and strong and athletic. And so the way the the chairs were designed back then. The backs of the chairs were fixed and the seats flipped up into them. And so I had to I couldn't run up the aisle because they were wrestling in it. So I just decided, spur of the moment, I wasn't thinking about it. I just ran up on the backs of the chairs, all about 15, 20 rows to cut these people off. Well, Christine thought that was the darndest thing she'd ever seen, because you're talking about running up on a 1-inch strip of the top of the back of the seat. And so
Right.
she, according to Jim Cornette, she talked about that for the entire night when they went out to dinner. And so a few weeks later, the ring announcer couldn't be there. And the former manager, and by that time, I had quit working for Andy Frayne, and Al Ante, who was the manager at Louisville Gardens, I said, I hear you quit Andy Frayne. Would you like to run security for me? So I actually went to work for Louisville Gardens. And Al would have to go up there and do the ring announcing whenever the ring announcer couldn't be there. And there was a Tuesday night that the guy couldn't be there, and Al hated doing it. And he said, hey, you want to be the ring announcer? Well, hell, I was a class clown. You darn right I want to be the ring announcer. That would be a hoot. So they gave me a microphone, and Jerry Jarrett basically said, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. And I went up there and just called the matches. And I found out let me back up. I went in and I called those matches that night because I had no clue what I was doing. I was just reading off the paper. At the end of the night, Miss Christine Keeney, she approached me and said, there's something about your voice. I'm not sure what it is. I hear that, but I don't hear it. People do. And she said, the guy can't be there next week either. Do you want to do it again? Well, yes, I'd love to. So I actually went home and turned on professional wrestling for the first time. And my grandfather, in his day, he watched boxing. So that's what I grew up with. So I found out that all you really need to do is lower your voice just a little bit and put in a little bit of from the Lower East Side of Parts Unknown, Louisiana, 275 pounds he is. So I went back with the coat and tie that week. And at the end of that night, they offered me the job. And so every Tuesday night from then I started in August of 1988. I always say that September 1st is my anniversary because I could never remember what date it actually was. And I did that until USWA folded, which was in the mid-90s. Danny Davis had decided he wanted to get off the road and want to start a training center. So he did just that. And he approached me about being his announcer and his television personality. I'd never dreamed of doing something like that. So Danny contacted Lawler and said, can I have your permission to use Dean? And permission was granted. And so the next thing you know, I'm on Ohio Valley Television and did the first 1,100 TV shows. Something I have never thought about in my life. All of a sudden, I was just there.
What did you think about like the wrestling business? Like obviously you just know it from maybe a little bit of policing, but did you like it? Were you a fan? Did you kind of take to announcing easily?
I was always a class clown, like I said before, and I moved. My father built and raced USAC sprint cars, so we were always moving to different towns in the rural Indiana area and Kentucky area. So I was always used to going into new schools every year and meeting new friends and trying to endear myself to them. So I was very used to talking to people. I was I never really watched pro wrestling until I started paying attention to when I was walking, Tojo Yamamoto and Jerry Lawler to the wrestling ring. I started watching on Saturdays Lance Russell and Dave Brown, and that's where I ended up being a fan. But that's where I also learned how to do it.
Did you know the moves like and everything, or is that just something that you just have to learn as you're kind of on the fly?
That's something I had to learn on the fly because in my day, guys would take, like for instance, the move that they called the Hurricanrana. Scott Steiner called it the Frankensteiner. So you had to learn some of these things. And sometimes it would happen so quickly, I would just call what was really happening in front of me. Oh, what a slam! Oh, I quit worrying about naming it because sometimes it was getting changed a lot. Um, and I never used big words. Um, Not to suggest that anybody wasn't able to understand, but if I used like the word inadvertently, I wouldn't want to lose somebody from the TV screen by them going to the dictionary to look up what the hell the word inadvertently means.
Right, right.
So I just used plain terminology and called it as I saw it, as quickly as it happened, and it served me well.
Were you a fan at all though? Like, did you kind of know some of the moves anyway, just because of being a fan of watching it?
I I was not a fan when I was offered the job because I had never watched professional wrestling. Again, my parents and grandparents came from the world of boxing, and so when she offered me the job, I went and turned it on for the first time and paid attention to Lance Russell and turned on Mean Gene and Gordon Soley, some of those, everything I could find. And I just was a sponge back then. I started absorbing everything that I could absorb. Of course, for the first few years before OVW started, I was going to Louisville Gardens every Tuesday night and just being strictly the ring announcer. There was no play-by-play and stuff. And so I learned from some of the guys that mentored me back then. Lawler taught me stuff. A gentleman his name was Frank Morel. In the 50s, he was called the French Angel, but he was the referee, and he mentored me a lot. Dean, do this. Here's what we do that, etc. So that's how I learned it. That's how I just got. I don't know about great, but I got better as I went on.
When you look at it too, Vince McMahon, who was announcing, in the 80s and even into the 90s, he wouldn't even say the moves. He would just go, "Oh, what a maneuver." And everyone loved it. I mean, it was just one of those things where you're just kind of paying attention to the action. I feel like nowadays they go too far and that every move has to be called, not necessarily needed.
Right. Uh, I, I think what you're telling me is Vince stole that from me.
Really?
Oh,
Kinda, yeah.
Vince had no clue who I was.
Hey, come on, what a maneuver. He would always say just one of those funny like lines that he would always say.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, DDT or whatever, he goes, "Oh, what a maneuver."
Vince, you owe me $1,000. You stole that from me.
Yes, yes, at least 1,000.
I
When
won't
you
hold my breath.
when you look at it and you're doing announcing, who are like as far as being with and like having be your color guy, if you will, who were some of the guys that you worked with early on that helped you out?
Well, quite a few. I did one show with Dirty Dutch Mantel, just one. Les Thatcher was a partner of mine for a little while. Um, I also the Hustler Rip Rogers. I learned a lot from the Hustler. Uh, the Hustler Rip Rogers could go to a match and stay outside the ring and eat up 5 minutes without even getting in, and made everybody mad in the arena just by his actions. And I learned so much from the Hustler. Um, I had the opportunity to do one play-by-play one time and learn with Jim Ross. They were just up here just to see everybody. That's back when Cena was the prototype and Batista was Leviathan and Brock Lesnar was a puppy and Randy Orton and all that stuff. I also Bill Watts one time and Al Snow for a period of time, and probably the biggest thing I learned was from Jim Cornette. Jim could talk for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and never say the same thing twice and keep you on the edge of your seat. I would get in every once in a while whenever he needed a sip of his Sprite.
What did you think about Jim? Did you like him? Did you guys get along well?
Oh, we got along very well. When I was when I was working down there as a police officer, Jim was a 15-year-old kid with his camera at ringside taking pictures, and his mother and Miss Jarrett were great friends. And they would sell his pictures at the photo table. So that's how Jim kind of got noticed into the business. And one thing led to another, and he ended up, becoming a big star and going to the WWE.
When you look at some of the things that go on with Cornette nowadays, do you pay attention to that, like his podcast and everything? Because I mean, he's one of the most popular podcasts out there.
I hear that he does. I don't follow a lot of podcasts unless I get the opportunity to be on one.
Yes.
But I hear that Jimmy's doing that, and I'll hear every once in a while that he mentions me, and I appreciate it. I'm not completely retired. I do a lot of other things, got a lot of other irons in the fire. So I mean no disrespect by it, but I don't follow a lot of podcasts.
Were you ever the owner of OVW? That's the question. Were you ever truly the owner?
If I told you that, I'd have to kill you.
That was a big rumor. I remember that you may have been one of the owners at one point.
It was so well done that even some of the wrestlers thought I was.
Wow, really? So you had them fooled?
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's awesome. That's when you truly know you've got them. When even the guys in the locker room are like, "Wait a second, is this real? What's going on here?"
Yeah, there was a time where for many years I wore glasses and I had a handlebar mustache for 38 years. And there was a day where Jim Cornette's wife, Sin, always wanted to cut my mustache off, but they could never figure out a way to make any kind of a storyline behind it. So there was Ben Hameen and the insurgency back when 9/11 was real popular, and the hatred for that part of the country. And so they ended up putting me in a camel clutch and cut my mustache off of me on OVW TV. As a matter of fact, he even put it in a baggie, and they ended up being on some kind of a plaque on a wall. They glued it onto the wall, my handlebar mustache. And from that, there became such hatred that the crowd, Danny came out and fired him, and the crowd was so excited that they finally fired him. And then I came out and was so upset that if you fire him, I'll never be able to get my hands on him again. And so within about 5 minutes, the crowd asked them to be rehired.
Yes, love it. Now, Ben, obviously, a great guy, a great gimmick as well. You actually did wrestle him, right?
Because of that, we did a tag team. I think Turk, I forget Turk's last name. I apologize, my friend. And Ben Hameen, Pops, and Muhammad Ali Vaez, who's been in Australia now for years and a happily married man. We built the cage, I believe it was, or we did one thing, then later on we built the cage or something like that.
Did you end up winning that match?
Well, hell yeah.
Nice. Were you trained at all as a wrestler or no?
No.
Wow. What did you think about that experience?
The biggest experience I ever had was actually the stuff in OVW was great. And that was a big part of my life. But one of the biggest thrills I ever had was Jerry Lawler decided to do a little thing with me where he got me involved in a match with, I think it was Ian Rotten, or was that the one with Reggie B. Fine? I forget. But there ended up being a tag team match that was put together. And I came out in an old football jersey that I used to wear, and I had the honor and thrill of my tag team partner being none other than the Boogie Woogie Man, Jim Valiant, Handsome Jimmy.
Wow. Nice.
And he basically took me to the ring and said, do this next, do that. It was a fantastic moment in life.
What did you think about taking bumps and stuff? Like, did you mind or did you not care?
Well, I didn't care. I was an athletic guy. I played softball 5 nights a week. I was on the police department, so I've been in my fair share of fights. The police department, I had a football team. I played on the football team. So taking impacts was no big deal. It's not like I did a bunch of them. There was one night that before all this happened, it was kind of as they were starting the idea of getting me involved in the ring. There was a tag team battle royal where Lawler and Jeff Jarrett were down to the Moondogs, and Richard Lee was their manager. Cujo and uh, gosh, I forget Larry's. Nevertheless, it wasn't Spot. I forget. So many years ago. So there was supposed to be a situation where I got to a point like Popeye the Sailor Man. I stands all I could stands. I couldn't stands no more. And I ran into the back and I came out with a board and I handed it to Lawler, and Lawler put it over the back of Cujo and knocked him out of the ring, and Lawler and Jeff won the tag team titles. Well, the Moondogs took exception to that. Surprise, surprise. And they dragged me into the ring and they ripped my jacket into about 8 pieces and ripped my shirt off of me. And Moondog Cujo, at 390 pounds, got up on the second rope and gave me a belly-to-belly splash, and I thought that my spleen shot out by...
Whoa. That's, I don't know, something you're not prepared for, right? Jeez Louise.
That, and then the other Moondog grabbed the trash can and put it across my back about 6 times.
What did you think about that? I mean,
Good.
were you prepared for that?
Good times. Now, I wasn't prepared for it, but there was somebody in the crowd that was videotaping that night, and if you go to YouTube, you'll find Dean Hill versus the Moondogs is on YouTube, and you can see it.
Wow, that's awesome. The Moondogs, pretty legendary to get in there and wrestle them. I mean, even though they hurt you a little bit, but pretty awesome to get in there and wrestle them.
It was an awesome, strange, eventful period of my life. I'm honored to have been there.
Man, when you look at it, it's like everything is a little fluky. Like you get in the ring, you're able to wrestle. You know what I mean? It's like crazy the way you kind of get thrown into the business, thrown right into the fire.
And something that I never planned on doing, something they never planned on doing. They found out that the people just liked me with me being a Louisville police officer, and they all kind of knew me, and they knew me from a couple of years of me walking the bad guys to the wrestling ring. So that was it, just kind of something that developed over the years.
Who were some of the guys in USWA that came through that you called their match? Was Steve Austin was there? I guess Lawler, Jarrett. I mean, who were some of the guys that came through when you were calling?
There was a gentleman called Stunning Steve Austin that had blonde hair all the way down to his shoulders. There's a video of him wrestling Nightmare Danny Davis. There was a gentleman by the name of the Master of Pain that went on to become the Undertaker. There was a gentleman that they first, and he'll be mad at me for saying this, but there's a gentleman that they brought out during Christmas for the first time, dressed up like a Christmas tree, and they called him the Christmas Creature. And he went on to become Kane. Gosh, who else went on? There was the Steiner brothers. There was a ton of people that, anybody that was big time went on to the next level. And OVW, it was the prototype was John Cena. Leviathan was Dave Batista. Brock Lesnar, first time there. Randy Orton, Shelton Benjamin, Rico Constantino. There was, and Rico Constantino won. Oh gosh, I was going to try to think of it was a TV show where you had to, it was almost like Ninja nowadays, but it was called something different back then. And he was actually the winner of that show one year and ended up getting into professional wrestling.
American Gladiators, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
that's it. Exactly. Good memory.
When you look at it, there's so many guys that came through OVW that ended up in WWE that became, the legends of the business. It's insane, all the guys that came through OVW.
Well, and part of that was due to Jim Cornette. When his mother was at the age where Jim wanted to be closer to her, he decided to leave Connecticut and moved back home here in the Louisville area to be closer to mom. And he reached out to Johnny Laurinaitis, Johnny Ace,
Yep.
and Jim Ross. And because of Jim's connection with them, we ended up becoming the training center for the WWF that became the WWE. And I pulled into our back lot one day, and three guys walked over to me and shook my hand. And it was Cena and Brock Lesnar and Shelton Benjamin.
Wow. It's just crazy to think of, like, you know what I mean? To have that and be like, okay, this is a place where a few guys came out of and they did this. Is like, no, this is where like a ton of guys came out and became huge names. It was like the perfect training center. You could say perfect timing or whatever it is. I mean, just the perfect spot.
It's sometimes things happen for a reason. And Danny Davis, this wasn't a fluke for Danny because Danny knew his stuff. He trained these guys. He saved a couple of people's careers. There was a gentleman that was sent to us because WWE thought that he had lost his perspective, started taking things for granted. And the first time they sent him to us, we were at a little bitty gymnasium in Louisville called St. Therese Gym on East Kentucky, as I recall. And I knew he was coming, but I didn't know he was there yet. And so I walk in, and he's standing with his back against the wall at the end of this gym. In front of him were these two 7-year-old boys looking straight up at him, and one of them said, "Why are you here?" And his head fell down, and he turned and he walked up the steps, which was very near us, and I ended up walking up the steps behind him. He walked in, and he sat down in front of Danny and said, "Just kill me now." And Danny Davis cut about a 5 to 10 minute promo on him about, if I had your size, you know what kind of a star I could be. If I had this, if I had your ability to do that, have you any clue how much money I could make in this business? And it actually shook him a little bit. And between that and the fact that they had him do some other humbling things, it turned him around. He started taking his career more serious. He got back in the WWE and became even more famous in the years to come.
Would that be the Big Show? He actually, oddly enough, he just returned to OVW of all things recently. He did commentary for them, oddly enough. So, you know, he was giving back to the place that helped him out in his career for sure.
Oh yeah, I've not caught him doing that, but I'm sure he was good at it.
Pretty crazy to just to think, like, obviously he's in AEW now, but it's like, okay, I'm gonna make a little pit stop here and see what OVW's been up to. And obviously, I mean, they were a big part of kind of rebuilding him and repackaging him and getting him off. So not only do they build stars, they can repackage guys as well and help them, you know, get back to the WWE too.
They sent him to us for a while, not for the same reason, but they sent Mark Henry to us for a while. He was a great guy. And of course, a lot of the guys that started off with us that went on to the next level, I'm so proud for their careers.
And even if a guy gets injured or kind of rehabbing, they'll send him down there, you know, get some work and just get back in the swing of things, or they used to anyway, used to do that. And then the guy would come back.
Yes, yes. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head, but yes, there was situations like that.
There's even other guys that were there: CM Punk, Cody Rhodes, The Miz. I mean, there's even other huge names that are still, you know, killing it in the business today that came from OVW. So it seems like that was like the breeding ground back in the 2000s.
It was, and again, it was because of the connection of Jim Cornette through the WWE and them having so much confidence in Danny Davis. They knew what Danny could do, and he performed and made a lot of those guys' career.
Got to mention, you did call a guy an asshole, though, right? I mean, is that the most famous promo in OVW, or an a-hole? Excuse me.
There's a gentleman that is like Cornette. He could speak for 20 minutes, never say the same thing twice, and keep you on the edge of your seat. His name was Paul Heyman.
Hmm.
And Paul was with us at the time. And he said, do you have any problem dropping the F bomb? And I said, well, you got to understand, I ride downtown in the inner city. Sometimes that's part of asking for your driver's license. And so he said, well, I want you to do this and that with Johnny Jeter. And at the end of it, I want you to drop the F bomb. And I said, are you sure? And Danny was just sweating bullets at the time. And so I did basically what they wanted. I called him an asshole because he was in this little thing where he was disrespecting Matt Capitelli, God rest his soul. And so I called him an asshole as I was asked to do, and I walked off and I basically flipped him off and said, F you. And I realized that that wasn't enough. And I turned around, pardon me, I turned around, I walked back up to him, and I planted the big "You are number one." And I said, big and bold, and that's the best way to put it, big and bold. As I turned around to leave, there was a 10-year-old boy in the front row that was doing the Macaulay Culkin.
Yeah.
And I think you can find that on YouTube as well.
Very, very funny stuff. Shocking almost, like to see that from you. You're usually so mild-mannered,
That's one of those opportunities to stand out every once in a while.
Yes. And what is the Kenny Bolin story? He always says that you took the worst bump in wrestling, but
Oh
nobody's seen
God,
it.
that's the line from that Cornette gave us. Um, Me and Cornette were doing play-by-play at OVW on Mechanic Street, and there was a tall stage, for lack of a better term, that was made. It was like 5 steps to get up to this little platform that had us about 6 feet, maybe 7 feet up in the air. And at some point, Kenny came up and took offense to something that Cornette said. And so Kenny was giving Cornette some grief. So my job was to protect Jimmy. So I grabbed Bolin and started pulling him off Jimmy. And if you don't know Bolin, he weighed 340 pounds. And we started kind of going down the steps, and I couldn't keep him off of me, and I couldn't find the steps. So we basically fell about 5 feet onto solid concrete with Bolin on top of me, and my head went through a plastic bucket.
How did that feel? Jeez Louise.
Kenny will tell you that the damnedest thing that he thought about it was as soon as it happened, I whispered into his ear, "Are you okay?"
Wow. How about, are you okay? You know what I mean? Like, that's
Uh,
quite a bump.
I think I felt it the next day. I didn't feel it that morning or that evening.
Was Cornette right? Was it the worst bump ever in the history of the business?
The best bump ever taken in the history of the business that nobody saw but Jim Cornette.
Yes, the best bump. Yeah. That's great. Was it worse than taking that spot for the Moondogs? So that's the question.
Uh, the the impact with Bolin on top of me lasted one time. The deal with the Moondogs lasted for about what seemed like 20 minutes. It was more like 3 or 4. So I give the call to the Moondogs.
And was Ben, was he okay with you in the ring? He didn't take any liberties, right?
No, he didn't take any liberty. Well, everything went well. There was no big animosity that was carried on for years.
When you look at it, what about Jesse Goddard? You wrestled him too, didn't you? The Mr. Spectacular?
Mr. Spectacular, that was something that Al Snow put together. And it was one of these deals where, pardon me, Jesse got a little carried away and said, I can basically whip your butt wearing a pink buddy suit. And so I said, okay, you got a deal. So he had to come out and wear a pink buddy suit. And that was a hilarious night.
And he's featured on the OVW Wrestlers Netflix docuseries. He's featured on there too, Jesse Goddard.
And he was originally on one of the first, or at least one of the first series of Big Brother.
Yes, and just made his return not that long ago to Big Brother. Did a little funny skit, like he was basically talking to himself. They did two different things. So kind of funny, still hanging around, still doing his thing.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy for his career. I went into an OVW show a couple of years ago. I usually just go in maybe once a year during Christmas to say hi and Merry Christmas to everybody. I went into one that he was there, and I got to see him for the first time in probably years and years. He still looks as good and powerful as he ever did.
Oh, he's still big, Mr. Spectacular, still
That's right.
doing his thing. Do you still like in the OVW area? Do you still have interest in the product, or is it just one of those things where you're just too busy nowadays?
I've got so many other irons in the fire right now. I've got away from professional wrestling when Danny sold OVW to Al Snow and his partner. I decided it was time for me to retire as well. But Al said, I need a commissioner. Would you be interested in taking that role as the commissioner? And that was perfect. I was starting to get to the age where it was time to pass the play-by-play mic off to a younger person. As you start to get older and as your brain gets older, you might be calling and saying a lot of very important things, and really things are going really fantastic. And you get to the point where you're getting ready to say that one word, and sometimes it doesn't just pop into your brain like it used to back in the day. And when I started having that, I realized that it's time for me to pass this on, and I passed it on to Gilbert Coursey, and I became the commissioner for a while. That was great for me. But in 2020, they were getting ready to go international. And people that had watched me, or had watched, I should say, John Cena and those guys when they were on OVW over the internet, there's people in Japan and Germany and Australia and pick a country that if they were watching them, they knew who I was. But all of the new fans had no clue who this guy was standing in the ring. So they needed a face that all of these new fans to become would recognize. And that was Hall of Famer Al Snow. So that became a perfect time for me to retire from the business. Being in the business for 32 years is a lot more than a lot of guys can say. A lot of those guys, the ones that took bumps and their knees went out at the age of 35 and et cetera, et cetera. I never had to do a lot of that. All I had to do was what I'm doing now. But still, 32 years was a long time in professional wrestling. And I owe that all to Christine Jarrett, the Jarrett family, Jerry Lawler, and the Nightmare Danny Davis, and the Hustler Rip Rogers.
Awesome. What a career. And as we start to wind it down here, head towards the finish, do want to mention another thing, a part of your career, your book by John Cosper, See You at Ringside, A Life of Rock and Rollin' and Wrestling. Very, very cool stuff to have that out there.
I didn't know that you knew about that. It's an honor. When John was doing the book called The Bluegrass Brawlers, he interviewed me, and I was just honored and thrilled to be on page 183. I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. Somebody one time put on Facebook that they had met a celebrity. How cool that was. And I said, yeah, I once met Frank Sinatra. I thought that was a really cool moment. And they put back on Facebook, you have done so many different things in your life, you should write a book. And I responded, who the hell would want to read a book about my life? John Cosper sent me a message that says, between your years on the police department, your years of running security at Louisville Gardens, your years in professional wrestling, I think there is a book about your life. I was taken back and honored. And I just actually, we sat in a parking lot, and I just told stories about my past. Um, and when you're leading your life, you don't think about all the things that you've done. But when you get at the end of it and you look back on it, you're surprised as, oh my goodness, I can't believe that I really did do all that. My years at Louisville Gardens, I sold a gun to Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. I had a steak dinner with Ted Nugent. I was the bodyguard for one weekend for Barbara Mandrell, who was the Reba McEntire of her day. I've delivered a baby. I've been sideways in the Grinstead Tunnel here in Louisville at 90 miles an hour. I've been on top of the Kennedy Bridge, trying to talk a guy out of committing suicide. And all the people that I've met in professional wrestling, and I'll tell you a real quick story. I'm running security for a gentleman that at Louisville Gardens, you came there if you were on your way up the ladder or on your way down the ladder, as far as celebrity being famous. This guy was on his way up. His first album had just come out, and he was going to perform that night at Louisville Gardens. This gentleman said, I understand you run security here. Well, I'm this man's security team supervisor. And he was actually a vice president of the New York Outlaws motorcycle gang. And he said, I want this, I want this, I want this. I want you to put a man on the back door. And if somebody goes out, you close that door. And if anybody knocks on it, you don't answer it for nobody. So I said, sure. So I put a little 16-year-old usher back there. All you had to do was close the door when whoever went out. And about an hour later, I get a radio call that said, hey, you might want to get back here. This guy's eating this usher's rear end. So I run back there, and he's tearing this poor 16-year-old kid who's shaking him a new rear end. And I put my hand in the chest of the 16-year-old and moved him out of the way. And I said, this kid doesn't get paid to get yelled at. I do. What's wrong? And he started ripping my rear end about the fact that people were knocking on the door and this guy wouldn't let him in. And I said, are you done? He said, yeah. So I started ripping his butt about the fact that this is what you told me to do. You told us to be just like this. Don't you dare, rip this kid's butt. He did exactly what you told him to do. Well, this artist, his producer was about 10 feet away. And the producer came over and stood over by us and said, this guy's first name, I forget what it was. And he said, this officer's right. They are doing exactly what you told them to do. Nothing else. This is your fault. And if you ever screw up like that again, you're fired. So this artist is standing in the alley with his guitar behind Louisville Gardens and couldn't get into the door of his own concert.
Oh
and his name was Prince.
Whoa. Oh my God. Wow. I was going to say, I don't know if I'm going to be able to figure who this guy is. Oh my God. Prince. Wow. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Hell of a guitar player, smaller than I thought he was, but an amazing musician.
Interesting. I just found out his real first name is Prince. I always thought that was just a gimmick name, but that's his real first name.
Oh, learn something new every day. Yeah. I had no idea.
Right. But that's amazing though. Like the stories you get, like, who knows if this guy's going to become anything? It's like, holy crap. You know what I mean? Like, wow, what a life, what a story.
Another real quick one, because I know that you're getting ready to tie up, but I'm standing on stage with a couple of people, and this gentleman is playing the piano and he's doing his sound check. And he's doing all the notes, and there's two or three of us that are standing off to one side just watching him in amazement. And at one point, let's see, can I say this without saying who he was? No, I can't. It was Ray Charles. Whoa. And at one point, he's playing it, and he hits a bad note. And when he hits the bad note, he leans up, and he takes his glasses, and he raises them up and looks down at the piano and puts his glasses back down. We lost it. And he looks over at us and says, that gets him every time.
Wow, Ray Charles too. Wow, it's amazing. Anybody else? Toby Keith coming through there? Who else have you?
Oh, it was Toby Keith was 7 years old. From that generation,
Oh yeah,
Everybody,
true. He'd be way too young. What am I talking
yeah,
about? Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
everybody from back then. It was people like Jethro Tull, um, Boy George, Prince, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Um, the last concert that I ever worked was Easy E and the NWA.
Whoa. Damn. What'd you think about that one?
When they started yelling "F the police," I decided it was time to retire.
That's a good one. That's good. That's true. Hey, got to be careful out there, right? Yeah,
That's
especially.
right.
Yeah, true. When you look back at your wrestling career, and obviously, we're talking about the book too. Everyone should go to go eatsleepwrestle.com and get that book. But when you look at it, is it one of those things where you're like, man, I wish I would almost like got into it earlier, or is it just perfect timing? Everything happened perfectly.
Everything in my life has just been timing. Uh, People have knocked on doors, and I've been smart enough to open them. Or a door was open, I've been just smart enough to walk through it. I didn't realize I was being smart at the time. I was just doing something that I thought would be a cool thing to do. Um, I My dad was a musician. My dad's entire side of the family were musicians. So I played. I haven't played for years, but I played three instruments. The police department had an anti-drug rock and roll band here in Louisville called Street Heat. I played in that for 7 years. I played in the clubs for many years. Um, I've just been very blessed to have done a lot of things that turned out to be pretty cool. Nothing I intended to do.
Right. Maybe that even makes it kind of cooler because it's like I didn't really intend to be, in the wrestling business or do this or do that, but just how it just ends up happening is maybe makes it even cooler.
Yes, but you don't realize it at the time. But when you look back at somebody like John saying, "Here, look at this," and all these, because it starts off from when I was a kid and how I grew up in Southern Indiana, and we were poor, but we didn't know we were poor. Um, Actually, we thought we were in pretty good shape back then. My dad's father, my uncle Jude, Jude and Talitha Hill. Grandpa Jude had uh, a moonshine still underneath of the house, and they ran liquor on the weekends.
Wow, damn. What
As
a interesting life. Jeez.
as a matter of fact, they would run liquor on Saturday nights, and then on Sunday they would all go out to a place in Boonville, Indiana, which is where I'm from. It's near Evansville. To a place called Scales Lake Park, and they would all tinker on their car engines and all that stuff. And every once in a while, they would, drag each other. But the ladies were upset about the fact that they never could see who the winner was because they were always dragging away. And some of the guys had heard about some stuff that was happening down in Daytona, so they did what Daytona was doing, and they started running in circles so that when they came back around, the women could see who won the race. And you know what that was the birth of?
NASCAR?
NASCAR.
Wow. Oh my God.
Not by
Wow.
my grandparents. They were already doing it down in Daytona. Somebody else had this idea, but they heard about it and they brought it to Boonville, Indiana.
Wow. Damn. That's crazy. Moonshine, NASCAR, Prince. I mean, what else? I mean, what a crazy life. And to say a book, I mean, maybe it has to be a couple books. Jeez Louise.
Hey, and your podcast.
Yeah, yes, of course. Where all these great stories are coming out. But you probably should write another book with John Cosper. I mean, you got enough stories there to
Uh,
last a lifetime. Jeez.
I think I've had enough for this one. I'm just I'm happy and honored to have been part of that. If anybody wants to read about it, it's truly my honor. But I think one pretty much covered everything.
When you look at what's next, what is next? Anything wrestling related, or I know you said you got a million things going on, but anything wrestling related?
No, I've walked away from wrestling completely. I'm retired now, but I still do three things. during the day just to have something to do. I'm a driver for Enterprise uh, car rental. Enterprise, you owe me $1,000 for that plug.
Yes.
Um, I entertain in senior living homes. I'm honored and blessed to be in 22 different senior homes. I put together a little make believe radio station called WYOU Radio, taking you back in time. And I go in and I pretend as though I'm a radio station DJ, and I entertain the seniors. And when I get 85-year-old women that get up and dance, that's the best thing in the world. Then I've been honored and blessed to have been brought into the wedding business. I work at a very large wedding venue in southern Indiana called Lakeside Reflections, where I'm the MC and a coordinator. I also do some DJ work for them. And if need be, I'm the guy that says, "Dearly beloved and honored guests, we are gathered here today."
Wow. Awesome. Keeping very, very busy.
Yeah, I keep I'm like my mom. My mom worked until she was 87, just part time, but she worked until she was 87. So I'll continue to always have something to do. There's only so much TV you can watch every day.
True. Very true. Where can everybody find you and see you and if you want social media wise?
Well, if you just look up Dean Hill on Facebook, that's the only thing I'm on media wise. I don't Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff kind of got crazy after a while. But I use Facebook to promote myself in the wedding business, and every once in a while show a video of WYOU radio, um, and keep up with what my grandkids are doing.
Nice. And of course, eatsleepwrestle.com. Check out John Cosper and John Cosper Books for your great book, See You at Ringside. So just want to plug that out there as well for you.
And I got an opportunity back in, gosh, when it was this year, a real big time movie producer and director came to Louisville. They were filming a movie about Mildred Burke, who they called Millie, who was one of the first really big female wrestlers that emerged nationally back in the 50s. And they decided to come to Louisville, Kentucky to film it. Jim Cornette's in it. He's the commissioner. Martin Cove, I believe it is, who was for lack of a better term, the bad guy on The Karate Kid as opposed to Mr. Miyagi.
Yes.
Yep. I got to be on that movie with them. They used me as the ring announcer from Atlanta, Georgia. And the cool thing was, the end of the movie, the last real words that you hear, I get to say. So it's going to be coming out sometime. I don't know when, but with the strike that they had, may have pushed it back some. But it's going to be called Millie, and my honor to be a part of it. And the gentleman who was the director and the producer of this, first name was Ash. I forget his last name. I apologize, sir. Don't cut me from the movie because I don't remember your last name. But his dad was a very famous director and producer, and actually brought us the movies The Karate Kid and, drumroll, Rocky.
Ooh, nice. Wow, good stuff there. Very cool, man. Your life just gets more and more interesting each minute. Damn, it's crazy.
John Cosper reached out to him and said, "Hey, if you need an announcer, Dean Hill's your guy." So I was just very honored that John pushed me, and I've had an opportunity to be in a couple of smaller movies here in the Louisville area, just play little bit parts and stuff. A gentleman by the name of Bobby Lasser that does stuff here locally has used me. And Mike Busey, who was Simon Says on the WWE. It was Nova and OVW. He now manages a Fifth Third Bank here in Louisville, Kentucky. But they're all part of that stuff, and it's just a blessing that they remember the old man.
Hey, they love you after all these years. Can't blame them, right?
Go figure.
But Dean, thank you so much for all the time. Really appreciate it. Awesome stuff.
It's my honor. I appreciate you considering me worthy of being on your podcast. I thank you very much for putting over my book. I wasn't going to say anything about it. I didn't know whether I should or not. But this has been a great time, and I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to talk about it.